Welcome to the ultimate football boot tier list for 2021. Keep in mind that this tier list is going to be exclusively top-end models that are readily available for purchase and of course from relevant brands, all of which you can get below their normal retail prices by checking out the new releases page on my website, which of course will be the first link down below. Of course, these are my picks, so you're probably going to agree with at least some of them, and if you have a difference of opinion, feel free to express that down below in the comments, but I'll do my best to justify my rankings for each of these football boots. If you guys do end up enjoying this one and want to see more tier list videos, don't forget to support this one with a like, and I've also noticed that a lot of you guys who watch these videos aren't subscribed to the channel. If that's you, it would mean a lot to me if you could hit that subscribe button along with the little bell notification so you don't miss out on my next new upload.
Grip socks are great, but why pay up to $40 for a single pair when you can pay a lot less? Stop wasting money and get yours for just $14.99 a pair at puregripsocks.com.
The Future Z 1.1 is a definite standout when it comes to overall comfort, especially in the sock boot category, where for this year, we actually saw less sock boots than what we've been seeing for the last 5. I think one of the most unique elements here is this Fusion Fit Plus band in combination with this kind of opened up lacing system where this elasticated material really adapts to any foot shape, making for a very comfortable and secure feel on your feet. Not to mention the new sole plate and stud pattern for this latest generation of Future, I think is overall a nice improvement. It also features a $200 retail price, which is pretty rock steady across the entire Puma brand and attractive amongst the big brands at the top price points because they're just that much more affordable. This to me is easily an A-tier football boot. The King Platinum saw a gigantic spike in interest this year with Neymar's move from Nike to Puma. That hype has since died down, but the boot remains just as good as it was 2 years ago when it first came out. For me, this is a football boot that deserves to be applauded for its overall simplicity. The super thin kangaroo leather upper with minimal internal structure makes for a very pure and clean touch on the ball. The one-piece upper construction with this knitted material filling in where the tongue would normally be makes this feel a lot more modern and low profile compared to a lot of more traditional leather football boots. The overall fit and comfort is phenomenal. They're very lightweight, and this sole plate tooling that was originally taken from the Puma 1 line that has now been discontinued still holds up really, really well. Again, $200 retail price like other top-end Puma boots. This is an easy A-tier football boot for me. The Ultra 1.1, which was recently renamed to the Ultra 1.2 for seemingly no reason, is arguably Puma's greatest ever speed boot. The Matrix Evo upper is phenomenal in terms of giving you that really thin, raw touch on the ball, but also having that sock-like level of comfort without being overly padded. There's an argument to be made that the extra width and volume in the overall silhouette that they've gone for here is a little bit too much for a lot of people, but depending on the shape of your foot, you might actually appreciate that. For me, from a comfort standpoint, especially given how light these are, they are incredibly comfortable. Break-in time is minimal to say the least. And then the new sole plate and stud pattern is not only super lightweight, it has good flexibility to it, feels solid underfoot, and it offers really aggressive traction. Again, that $200 price point makes this extremely attractive compared to the Nike and Adidas alternatives in the same speed category. This for me is an S-tier football boot. The Nemesis Point 1, aka the boots Leo Messi wears, is basically the same as the model we had previously, but with a little bit of additional texturing on the surface that is admittedly noticeable, but it's a very minor change. Overall, it's still a very solid football boot, and given the changes we've seen Adidas make to the X series, trending away from textile uppers, this ends up feeling more sock-like and arguably more comfortable than their current flagship Speed line, of course this being their agility boot representative. Nonetheless, the boots fit extremely well. I still think there's an argument to be made that the sole plate is a little bit bulkier than it needs to be, and certainly the boots could be lighter, but in terms of overall performance, and especially considering how they're not very popular, meaning that they are regularly on sale, they're still a really solid football boot option. And hey, Messi wears them, granted they're custom, but they get the job done. This for me remains a B-tier football boot despite the changes they've made. And then there's the Nemesis Plus, which is the laceless variant of the 0.1 model I just showed you, which of course does see the introduction of some texturing on the surface, but other than that, it remains unchanged and is still one of those football boots that really baffles me in terms of why it even exists in the first place. For $275, it is nowhere near as good as other boots you can get at the same price point. The laceless system is subpar at best. The overall fit of the boot, I don't think is all that special. It feels bulky in comparison to any of the other laceless options from the Adi brand, and it's one of those boots that you simply should not buy unless you're getting them at a deep discount. This remains, just like last year, despite the improvements, a D-tier football boot. The Predator Freak Plus is the updated version of the very successful Predator 20 Plus, which of course maintains pretty much all of the same design elements. The sole plate and stud pattern is a direct carryover, but it does see refinements to the prime knit upper, which admittedly feels a little bit nicer and a little bit softer this time around. The demon skin rubber spikes are still scattered across the entire upper. You get even more coverage this time around, despite there actually being less spikes that have taken on a little bit of a new shape. I like the gimmick of adding them across the laceless system, although it's not super noticeable when you're actually playing in the boots. But the laceless system itself, the separation between the area across the top of the foot, as well as this long tail at the back, that many would still argue, including myself, is completely unnecessary. It does make a big overall difference in terms of the lockdown and general fit of the boot when they're on your feet. I think it's improvement over the Predator 20 Plus from simply a fit perspective, but I don't think it improves enough to move up the tier list. It's still a B-tier football boot. The Predator Freak 0.1, which I have here in the low-cut version, but they do also make a mid-cut variant for those that prefer a collar. It's equally as good, is of course the successor to the Predator 20.1, which was one of my personal favorite football boots of 2020. As far as what's changed, many would argue not enough, but the upper goes from a textile base to a full prime knit to match the upper found on the Plus model. A lot of people didn't like that about the previous generation, and this time around it does legitimately feel that much softer and more flexible, which ends up making the boot feel more comfortable this time around. It also features the new demon skin spike setup where there's technically less spikes, but you actually get more coverage this time around, and the new shape gives a slightly softer grip that I think is a little bit more manageable than the previous model. That also feels like a nice upgrade. They changed up the prime knit around the heel area, especially on the low cut version, which just makes them feel that much cleaner. And of course the sole plate and stud pattern does carry over. The only real negative as far as what's changed is the price going from $225 to $250. I don't think that was necessarily called for, but as far as the performance of the boot is concerned, it is phenomenal, and you really can't get anything else quite like it from any other model, at least from a performance standpoint. It's an S-tier football boot for me. The Copa Sense Plus is a controversial football boot to say the least. Being the representative of the modern heritage line from the Adi brand at this point, you expect something bearing the Copa name to feature not only a significant amount of leather, but also good quality leather. And I think when you compare it to the model it replaces, there's less leather, and the leather that is there doesn't feel quite as good. For me, it's a phenomenal football boot from a fit perspective, especially being laceless. I was really impressed with that, but it also feels like one of those football boots that is kind of overwhelmed by a lot of unnecessary gimmicks, like the memory foam pad right here on the medial side. Not that it's bad, but I just think that if they left it as pure leather, the touch would have been that much more pure. You also have a little one here on the medial side that you can barely even tell is there. Not to mention the Sense Pod system through the heel liner, which does grab your heel very well, but it is kind of a blister hazard. So it's something to be aware of. The new tooling for the sole plate, while I think it's better than what we had before, it's heavier and bulkier than I think it needed to be. And overall, I don't think it has the same magic as the previous model from at least a touch perspective. So for me, this is a C-tier football boot. I'm not sure why you would pick these over other options out there. The Copa Sense 0.1 is equally as confusing. It features even less leather than the laceless Sense Plus model. It features synthetic through the midfoot and a central lacing system with a standalone tongue that I actually quite like the feel and look of. It gives the boot a much more traditional vibe than most other options out there. However, nothing about the construction and feel of this boot, especially given that it's supposed to be a representative of the Copa name, really makes any sense at all. There's not enough leather. The Sense Pods through the heel make the boot way more uncomfortable out of the box than it needs to be. And for a lot of people, they're just never going to have the same comfort as a traditional heel liner because of this design. And then the sole plate and stud pattern, while not as premium looking as the Plus, is exactly the same. And again, kind of unnecessarily bulky and heavy for what it needed to be. It's not a bad pair of football boots, but for $225, if you're after something that is about a leather touch on the ball, that's not really what you're getting from this. For me, this is a D-tier football boot. The X-Ghosted Point 1 is a phenomenal take on a speed boot. It sees some tremendous change when compared to the previous generation of X boots, ditching the mesh base upper in favor of what is basically just a thin synthetic reinforced by a textile grid mesh. Nonetheless, the barefoot feel is extremely raw and really best in class if you're just looking for the thinnest possible touch on the ball. I'm still not in love with the way that they've done the lacing system. I think something more centralized and maybe even a little bit deeper would benefit the boot from a fit and comfort perspective. That's something that for me does still hold this back when you're comparing it to its main competitors in the Nike Mercurial and the Puma Ultra. It still features a phenomenal heel liner with these large, soft pillows. I'm a big fan of that. And then the new speed frame construction not only feels really solid, but it also gives you this tremendous amount of responsiveness with this Carbitex carbon insert through the forefoot. It's unlike anything else. This to me is the best sole plate you're gonna find on any speed boot, period. And then the stud pattern has been made that much more aggressive from the previous generation X, not quite matching the Mercurials, but inching that little bit closer. I have a hard time ranking this in the S tier simply down to the comfort, but that's really a personal preference thing. So for me, I have to rank this as A tier. The X-Ghosted Plus is the first time a laceless speed boot has actually made any sense in my opinion. Not only does this boot fit extremely well, although it is laceless so your mileage may vary, but the lockdown provided, and that's something that's super important with a speed boot, you want it to have that responsive feel. While not as good as the X-Ghosted Point 1, it comes much closer than any previous laceless speed boot we've seen out of the Adi brand. The Mirage Skin Synthetic, while technically different from the Point 1, is equally as thin, gives you that raw barefoot sensation with no extra padding or protection for that matter, so should you get stepped on, you're definitely going to feel it. It features the same heel pillows, but with a little bit of that kind of reverse Velcro rough texture to it. And then of course you get that same speed frame sole plate with the Carbitex insert and the updated stud pattern that's just that little bit more aggressive. This for me, if you must have a laceless football boot, this is probably the one to get. For me, it ranks in the A tier, just like the Point 1. Copa Mundial. It's S tier, and I don't want to argue about it. The Furon 6 Plus is an evolution of the already fantastic V6 Pro, and basically it just sees a lot of little refinements that make this a truly impressive football boot in the speed category that surely will go unnoticed by a large amount of people because they just don't want to wear New Balance football boots, which I suppose is fair. The fit weave upper is a little bit thinner than what it was before and incredibly soft and sock-like. If you're looking for a speed boot that has the softest feel on your feet, this is it. Look nowhere else. The central lacing system provides really good lockdown and security with the laces tied tight. The heel liner and general finishing around the heel area of the boot is phenomenal. Top tier, not something that you would expect from what is a lesser known football boot brand. And then the sole plate and stud pattern is not only super lightweight, not only really flexible, but the stud pattern is extremely aggressive, mainly down to the fact that it's quite similar to what you're gonna find on the Mercurials. It's also available in a wide fit variation, which makes it a great option if you do have really wide feet. And again, one of those boots that's not gonna get the recognition it deserves, but for me, this is easily an A tier football boot. The Tekela V3 Pro is the laceless control boot offering from the New Balance brand that is a cop-out in the laceless category in every possible way. This knitted upper feels hard and rigid and just not premium at all. The laceless system is about as poor as it gets and is 5 years behind what Adi is currently up to. The sole plate and stud pattern I don't mind at all, but because of how bad the upper is, how poor it fits, and really how terrible a value for money proposition this is at its normal retail price, this is one of those football boots that I simply cannot recommend. Even if it is on sale, this is an F tier football boot. The Rebula Cup has been somewhat of a controversial release for the Mizuno brand, being that it is the replacement for the very tech-forward Rebula 3, which was extremely well received, and when people saw a much more simplified variant of that football boot in the Rebula Cup, they were understandably upset. However, it's not all bad. This is still a phenomenal football boot, just a lot more simple. You still get Mizuno's signature super high quality kangaroo leather at the front, although less leather than the Rebula 3 admittedly, with memory foam inserts. So this definitely has more of a padded sensation when compared to the model it replaces. And then of course through the midfoot, which also has memory foam inserts, you're going to find a synthetic material that actually has a very sticky sensation to it. Not quite to the extent of the demon skin spikes on a pair of Predators, but kind of something along those lines. You also get a deep lacing system that is slightly off-centered, which does make this kind of unique, along with a standalone tongue. I love the heel liner with the suede material, very comfortable and also grips your sock. And then the sole plate and stud pattern from the Rebula 3 is a direct carryover, and for me, just one of the best feeling sole plates and stud patterns on the market. Super underrated in terms of how natural it moves with your foot. It's an expensive boot. I understand why you would be upset with it, and I don't think it ranks quite as high as the Rebula 3, but it's still for me an A-tier football boot. The Morelia Neo 3 Beta is really the first major redesign we've seen to the Morelia Neo lineup since it was first introduced in 2010, and for me at least, it kind of solves all the issues that I had with the previous generations, still maintaining the super soft kangaroo leather at the front, which is a little bit thinner than it was before, but still extremely soft, and then of course replaces that synthetic material along with the traditional standalone tongue design for some knitted material as well as some textile along the sides that is just much softer, much more flexible, and then the one-piece upper construction just makes the boot feel that much more seamless on your feet with no more overlapping materials. The lacing system still runs nice and deep, giving you a nice secure sensation. The comfort of the boot is better than it has ever been. I really appreciate going with this little heel tab in this very flexible, stretchy knit, just because it doesn't rub on the back of your Achilles tendon anymore. And then the update to the sole plate and stud pattern is minor, but is noticeable in terms of it just feeling that little bit more natural. There's an argument to be made that this boot deserves a slightly more aggressive stud pattern, but for those that have been fans of the Morelia Neo series for a long time, I think this is a nice improvement, and given the quality of the boot, as well as the, I guess, offering of features, you really can't get this from anything else other than maybe the Puma King Platinum, but I still think it's separated by quite a bit in terms of overall quality. For me, this is an S-tier football boot. The Morelia 2 is a style of football boot that certainly is not for everybody, especially in 2021, but for what it is as close to perfection as I think I've ever seen from a pair of football boots. The kangaroo leather upper not only covers the entire upper, it is of a quality standard that is unmatched with any other brand. They've eliminated the fold over flap tongue, which some people might not like the look of, but from a feel perspective and certainly eliminating extra bulk across the top of the foot, it is very much appreciated. The comfort of this boot is a 10 out of 10. There's no other way to put it. And then the sole plate, while it might look very old school, it's made with new plastic materials that make this much lighter than even some of the speed boots that I've talked about in this video. It's an expensive product. It's a very simple pair of football boots, but if you're looking for a simple boot done to basically perfection, this is the one you should buy. This is an S-tier football boot. There's no question about it. The Tiempo Legend 8 Elite is a great football boot when it comes to objective performance. The comfort, the lockdown, the traction, the weight of the boot, everything Nike have done here makes sense for a football boot in 2021. But being that it is a Nike Tiempo with a full kangaroo leather upper, even with this completely unnecessary diamond texturing, that kangaroo leather does not end up being the star of the show. Yes, you can feel its softness, but the touch on the ball being interrupted by an internal layer of Flyknit through the midfoot, as well as the internal quad fit system, you just end up with so many different layers of material between your foot and this super soft leather that the specialness is kind of lost in the mix of all of this technology. It's not that they're bad football boots. This is a boot that I would be very happy to wear, but if I want something with a leather upper, I want to be able to feel that leather. It needs to be the star of the show, which is why I think the Tiempo Legend 8 Elite is a B-tier football boot. The Phantom GT is an interesting football boot because it took over for two different lines from Nike, replacing both the Phantom Venom as well as the Phantom Vision. And up until very recently, it was kind of just a wider variant of the Mercurial with less interesting tech and arguably worse performance characteristics. But because the Mercurial has transitioned away from Flyknit, it now kind of makes a little bit more sense in Nike's current lineup. It's a thin Flyknit upper with generative texture, which is what the GT stands for, running across the entire boot. It's got some roughness to it. It's not sticky like the Predator and certainly doesn't provide nearly as much grip, but the texture certainly doesn't go unnoticed. It also has a little bit of a wider last when you compare it to something like a Mercurial, although the off-centered lacing system, depending on the shape of your foot, does create some pretty ugly folds and creases in the upper that would have been eliminated had they just centralized the lacing system, but that also wouldn't have left you with this clean surface to strike the ball that I think a lot of people really like and does kind of call back a little bit to the days of the Hypervenom Phantom and even the T90 Laser series before that. This, of course, is the low-cut variant. They also make a mid-cut model where you can pay $25 more to have a little bit of extra material around your ankle that does absolutely nothing. And then the split sole construction is really good. It doesn't have the anatomic sole plate of the Mercurial series, but it feels solid, and the slightly toned down stud pattern for the FG model is again comparable to the Mercurials, just not quite as impressive. Overall, they're really good football boots, but I don't think they rank too highly. It's a B tier for me. The Mercurial Vapor 14 Elite, the most popular top-end football boot on the market, and for good reason. We always expect the best of the best when Nike launches a brand new Mercurial, and while they've made a significant amount of changes, transitioning from a full Flyknit upper to what they're calling Vaporposit, the actual difference in feel is a lot more minimal than I think a lot of people would expect. If you're coming from a Vapor 13 Elite, expect something that's a little bit thinner, a little bit less padded, and honestly, most of what's going on with this liner highlighted in all these different colors is more, I guess, for the marketing purpose than it is in terms of things that you're actually going to feel on your feet. It's a little bit thinner, it's a little bit more raw than what we had before, and I guess does trend back towards the Teijin synthetic days of the Mercurial series, but you still maintain the Flyknit across the top of the foot. You still have the one-piece upper construction. The lacing system is nice and deep as well. The low-cut construction of the Vapor remains with this added tail, which I personally like the look of and doesn't really cause any discomfort, but then they did little things like speed wings, which do absolutely nothing. They're literally pieces of plastic glued to the side of your heel, and then they also changed up the tooling to make it look more fancy with this bar through the middle, but it effectively does nothing. It even sees a little bit of a weight increase in comparison to the previous generation, but does maintain the anatomic sole plate and the super aggressive traction that is arguably best in class depending on what you're looking for. I would like to bump this down from the previous generation, but I still think it does everything so well, and nothing does feel like a Mercurial, so you truly have no alternative. This for me is an S tier football boot. The Superfly 8 Elite is a Vapor 14 with a collar. If you have $25 more and you like having the collar, then you should buy the Superfly instead of the Vapor. Otherwise, save the cash. Nothing else about the boot is different. It's also S tier. And there you have it. That is the ultimate football boot tier list for 2021. Do you agree with my picks? Do you disagree with my picks? Why or why not? I'm always curious to hear all of your thoughts and opinions down below in the comments, as well as any questions that you might have. I'll do my best to answer them. Again, if you're interested in any of the latest football boots for 2021, check out that first link down below in the description, the new releases page on my website, where you can basically find everything with exclusive SR4U coupon codes to pick boots up below their normal retail prices. You do not have to pay retail. Can't tell you how many times I've said that before. If you guys aren't subscribed to the channel already, make sure you hit that subscribe button along with the little bell notification so you don't miss out when the next new video goes live. You can find all my social media info linked down below in the description as well. And other than that, guys, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.